Hi there. Thank you so much for taking this time to join us for this webinar. This is MedCognito coming to you with an IELTS webinar, specifically an IELTS writing webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We are glad that you are here, and we are certain that you will be here having learned something about the IELTS Writing Task 1. Today's topic, how to master the IELTS Writing Task 1. And so it's a general overview of what is required for the IELTS writing test. There are two tasks in the IELTS writing test, and we will focus today specifically on the writing task 1. We hope that you have a wonderful time and that you do pick up a few hints as to how to write and to pass the IELTS writing test. And so we will proceed straight away and get right into the material. And so what is the objective of our study today? We would hope that you would have picked up some skills, some knowledge that with time, as you practice on and on, you will become quite good at answering questions for the writing task 1. And so that's the aim of today's webinar. We just hope that you'll pick up some knowledge and some skills that would eventually help you to ace and to pass the IELTS writing task 1 test. And so what does the IELTS writing test involve? What is required of you in the IELTS writing test? You are given 2 writing tasks, and then you will have a total of 60 minutes within which to write these tasks. For today's presentation, we'll focus on task 1 as related to the academic IELTS test. At MedCognito, we do both academic and general training tests for IELTS. But for today's webinar, we will focus specifically on task 1 as related to the academic writing test. You would have 20 minutes for task 1. You would usually have to meet a 150-word threshold requirement in which you would have to describe a graph, a table, a chart, a map, a combination of these, something similar to these, or it may be a combination of these. This task comprises of 1/3 of the score, and so it does make sense that you spend a third of the 60 minutes, which is the 20 minutes, to write this test. You would have to make comparisons in writing if necessary. And at the end, we will take a look at an example just to flesh out all the things that we will discuss during this webinar. And so, again, task 1, what does it involve? You'd have to summarize graphical or tabular information using academic language. Remember, this is specifically for the IELTS academic. And so you would have to use academic language, formal language. Include only main aspects of the graphs or tables. And so there's a lot of information that you can be able to glean from the graph or from the table that will be presented to you. And in essence, it's a summary task. And so you should be able to identify what are the main aspects of the graph or the table. If any individual is looking at it, what kind of information are they going to be looking for? And so your task could be to identify those and to present that in a 150-word summary. It would really, really help if you can plan carefully before you start writing, so that essentially before you start writing, you know exactly what you plan to write, what kind of comparisons you want to make. You want to be sure of this before you proceed with the writing. In that way, once you start to write, you can write quickly, have some time left over, and then go over your work just to be sure that there are no grammatical errors or any kind of errors that will go forward to the examiner. Now you'd have to write and afterwards edit before the submission, as I just mentioned. Like I mentioned, we will be focusing on the task 1 today, but I'll quickly go over what is required for task 2 and then delve a bit deeper into the writing task 1. For task 2, you are required to write an essay, 1 essay. You would have 40 minutes to write the essay. It's 2/3 of the score again. So it makes sense that you're going to use 2/3 of the time that is available to write this task. You're expected to write somewhere between 250 to 300 words for the writing task 2. Now, a little bit further about task 2, it's a discursive essay, and essentially what that means is that you are to ask to investigate a topic in terms of writing. Together, you have to read, evaluate evidence, and present a position on a topic based on the evidence gathered. And so this is a general definition for what a discursive essay is. And so in this particular task, you will be given a topic and you would have to approach the topic from different angles. Read and understand the question that is being given. It is critical that you clearly choose a point of view in this writing task. So either you agree with a particular viewpoint or you disagree with that viewpoint, and you would have to elaborate on it clearly, given evidence to back whatever point of view you decide to go with. You would have to balance your personal observations and opinions with different perspectives. And so you would have to look at the given topic from different angles. You agree with it because of reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. You can come at it and say that others would want to give this particular reason why they would want to oppose your stance, and then provide a point that would counter the so-called opposition may come up with. And so, again, you are given a topic, you'd have to look at it from different angles. You can draw upon real-life knowledge and experience in order to support and to back your points for this particular writing task. It's very important that you read and understand the topic, because if you digress from the topic, that will substantially lower the score that you end up with. And so it's very important that you read and understand the topic. Whatever you end up writing would have to be based on the question that is being asked. So take your time to read and to understand the main topic. I'll quickly go over the scoring criteria for the IELTS Task 1. And so for the scoring criteria for this one, we are looking at a number of criteria: the task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. I would quickly go through these tasks in the next couple of slides. But essentially, candidates, things to note under the scoring criteria, as in when the examiners are looking at your script. You should know that the scripts will be penalized if they are, 1, under the minimum word length. Most often, you will see in the question that the minimum number of words required is 150. No matter what you do, try and hit this minimum 150 word required. Of course, you can't hit it exactly, so you'd have to go over a little bit. But please don't waste your time going to as much as 200, 250 words. Then you wouldn't be achieving the aim of this task, which is that you would have to summarize whatever graph or table you've been given. And so you just want to stay around 150. You may go a little bit above the 150 just to complete your final sentences. So that's great. But no matter what, please hit the minimum number of words, and that's usually 150. Whatever you write should not be partly or wholly plagiarized. And so you may have seen a similar topic. You may have, in preparing for the IELTS exam, you may have read a particular, you may have read some resources where you may have seen maybe a question that's that closely related to the one that you've been asked to answer. It's important that you don't plagiarize. You don't memorize that and then come and pour that wholly here. It's important that whatever you are putting down, you put it in your own words. It has to be something that's been filtered through your thought processes. Again, you'll be penalized if you don't write it as an essay. You should have paragraphs where you are looking at the table, looking at the graph, and you are analyzing it, not putting down bullet points or in notes form, as that is not what is required for the task. And so you'd have to organize it into an essay with paragraphs, and then you make descriptions for either the graph or the table that you have been given. And so under the scoring criteria, I will go through a few of the points. Task achievement. This assesses how appropriately, accurately, and relevantly the response fulfills the requirements set out in the task using a minimum of 150 words. Again, you'd have to meet the minimum criteria, usually 150 words. Academic writing task 1 is a writing task which has a defined input and a large predictable output. It's basically an information transfer task which relates narrowly to the factual content of an input diagram and not to speculated explanations that lie outside the given data. And so what we are saying here is that you are stick to your data. You have been given data in the form of a graph, table, or in some other form. You've been asked that summarize it, make comparisons. You stick to that. You stick to the facts within that. Your opinion regarding the facts given is not required in this task. And so you will be deviating. You will be digressing from the the task if you go off that tangent. So stick to the facts that are given and then come up with an essay summarizing the information given there and making comparisons when necessary. You would have to go through that process in order to meet this criteria, which is task achievement. Now, there's also coherence and cohesion. Now, the criterion is concerned with overall clarity and fluency of the message, how the response organizes and links information, ideas, and language. Coherence refers to linking ideas through logical sequencing, and cohesion refers to the varied and appropriate use of cohesive devices, so conjunctions, logical connectors, etc., to assist in making the conceptual and referential relationships between and within sentences clear. And so essentially what this is saying is that coherence, whatever you put down has to be logical. Cohesion, the thoughts that you put down in different sentences from one paragraph to the other, you would have to connect them using logical connectors, conjunctions. And so that's essentially what this scoring criteria, this coherence and cohesion, this is what it's looking out for. Lexical resources, range of vocabulary the candidate has used, and the accuracy and appropriacy of that use in terms of the specific task. And so you'd have to use a wide range of vocabulary in describing the graph or the table, whatever has been given to you. You would have to use it appropriately and as accurately as possible. And then the final scoring task, grammatical range and accuracy. Now, this criterion refers to the range and accurate use of the candidate's grammatical resource as manifested in the candidate's writing at sentence level. And so this is looking at your grammar, the range and the accuracy. So, for example, sentences, you would have to use a variety of sentences, simple, complex, compound sentences. You'd have to use a number of the tenses that you are using. They would have to be right, whether present, past. You'd have to use it appropriately. Whatever tense that is used in there will have to be used appropriately. And so these are the criteria that is being looked at when the writing task 1 for IELTS academic is being evaluated. We'll take a few minutes to quickly go through a sample question and then a sample response just to highlight a few things. And again, just to flesh out a few of the things that we have said in previous slides. And so we take a question. I'm reading the question now. We should spend about 20 minutes on this task, as was mentioned earlier on. If you skip past the question, you see another instruction over there. Write at least 150 words. So again, no matter what you do, please ensure you hit your minimum word count of 150. Don't spend time writing too many words either. So try as much as possible, practice, so that you will know, you would have set in your mind how to achieve the 150 words on the exam day. And so from the question, the chart below shows the number of men and women in further education in Britain in 3 periods and whether they were studying full-time or part-time. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, and so quickly we look down there, we see a bar graph. We see male, female. On the vertical axis, thousands in further education. And on the horizontal axis, we have years, 1771, 1881, 1991. And then we have that for male and female. And we also have full-time education given in dark bars, and then part-time education given in light bars. And so the question is, how do you approach this? We go back again to what we were asked to do. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. And so we go and then we ask, what kind of features can we summarize? We've got information about education, about the male, about females. We can summarize that. We've got time periods, 1970, 71, 1881, 1991. We can summarize that for males. We can summarize that for females. And then we can make comparisons between the numbers that we have for male and for females. What again do we have? We have people studying part-time, people studying full-time. we can decide to make this comparison within the male category between the male and the female who are studying part-time. We can make comparisons between male and female who are studying full-time. We can even go in there and make comparisons within the male category, those who are studying part-time and full-time. And so we see that there are lots of angles that you can approach this from. We remember from this example that we are told to summarize. And so all this information that we have, we would have to put that in a few words as much as possible. All of the different ways in which we can compare them, which we think are relevant. We would have to do that with as few words as possible. Just a point, something to note over here on the graph. It says that thousands in further education. And so just so that you know, the numbers that are given there, if you be given 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000 on a vertical axis, but remember it's thousands in further education. And so the 200 that we have over there, it's 200,000. 400, 400,000. The 1,000 will be 1,000,000, which is essentially a million. And so take note of that. When we go in to make the comparisons, we have to be as specific as possible. And so, for example, you want to say that you want to make a statement. In 1970-71, there were 1 million male students who were in part-time education. You would have to be very specific over there. You mention the year, you mention the number, and then you go on with it. And so you shouldn't just go ahead and then be making blanket comparisons. Let's see, in 1980-81, for males, there were fewer students in part-time education compared to 1970 and 71. No, you would have to be very specific. You would have to give the figures. In the case of, let's say, 1980, 1981, the figure that you have, it's somewhere in between 800,000 and 1 million. And so in that case, you have to make a good guess. You look between 800 and 1,000 and try to divide it to come up with that number. So you look at it, what is it? 850,000, 840,000. You'd have to make a good guess over there and then go with that figure. And so we have this question before us. Let's take a quick look at some sample answers and see how they were graded, just so that we have an idea as to what is expected of us during the IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. And so this is a sample script. This is a bar chart of the number of men and women in further education in Britain in 3 periods. And so I'll say the first sentence, it summarizes what the graph is about. In 1970, most of the men were studying part-time. But from 1980, studying part-time was decreased and studying full-time was increased. And in 1990, it was twice as many adults as in 1970. On the other hand, women studying full-time were increased, and not only full-time, part-time also were increased. In 1990, studying full-time was 3 times as many students as in 1970. If compare men and women, as you see, in 1970, men were studying more than women, full-time or part-time. But it changed from 1980, and then in 1990, women were studying part-time more than men, and studying full-time was the same number. It shows you women has a high education now. And so reading through this presentation, you can clearly see that there are quite a number of errors here. In between sentences, the writer has capital letters for words that are not proper nouns. You have commas and full stops being used wrongly. Some of the sentences they are grammatically incorrect. And so you see that there are quite some issues with this write-up. And so an example of a comment that the examiner may pass concerning this, and before we go into it, in the IELTS writing, you are graded from band 0 to band 9. And so over here, this writer is given a band 5. That's somewhere in the middle, which is, again, it's not a very good band. The length of the answer is just acceptable. So he met the 150-word criteria. There is a good attempt to describe the overall trends, but the context would have been greatly improved if the candidate had included some references to the figures given on a graph. Again, so the figures that you saw on the left-hand side, 400,000, 600,000, 800,000, you would want to mention them specifically. Now, without these, the reader is lacking some important information. So again, the reader doesn't really, by reading this, he wouldn't really be aware, he or she wouldn't be really aware what is happening. The answer is quite difficult to follow, and there are some punctuation errors that cause confusion. The structures are fairly simple, and efforts to produce more complex sentences are not successful, which are the grammatical errors that we did see in there. Now another sample answer, which you see the higher band score. And so I'll quickly read through this. According to this graph, the number of men and women in further education in Britain shows the following pattern. In the case of male, the number of males has declined slightly from about 1,000, which is a million, in 1970-71 to about 850,000 in 1991. However, the figure rose back to about 850,000 in 1991 from about 820,000 in 1980-1981. The proportion of full-time education has declined during this period. However, the proportion of part-time education has increased dramatically. I'll leave the rest and quickly go through the examiner comments. Now, the candidate has made a good attempt to describe the graphs, looking at global trends and more detailed figures. Very good point over there. There is, however, some information missing, and the information is inaccurate in minor areas. And so in pulling out these figures, you have to ensure those figures are correct. There are some areas that if the figure that you pull out is a wrong figure, you will be penalized for it. However, if it's an estimate and it's close to the figure enough, as in the case that we had, where we had a graph in between the 800,000 and the 1 million mark, and it wasn't too clear, making a good estimate over there would pass. There is, however, some information missing and information is inaccurate in minor areas. Now, the answer flows quite smoothly, although connectives are overused or inappropriate, and some of the points do not link up well. And so we have some coherence issues over there. The grammatical accuracy, some coherence and connectivity issues there. The grammatical accuracy is quite good, and the language used to describe the trends is well handled. However, there are problems with expression and the appropriate choice of words, and whilst there is a good structural control, the complexity and variation of the sentences are limited. And so, as I mentioned, you will have to vary the sentences. You must have simple, complex sentence, compound sentences. You will have to vary as you describe the graph. And so in all of this, what is the key? What are some key takeaways that I want you to go with? And I want you to leave with one for today. The point being that pay careful attention to graphs, tables, etc. As meeting the task achievement criteria depends on it. And so if you mention, when we went through the task achievement criteria, we did mention that you would have to answer correctly the question that is being asked about the graphs. You would have to meet that criteria and answer the question appropriately. And so in order to meet that, you would have to pay careful attention to the graphs, specifically the question that is being asked in that graph, so that whatever you go ahead to describe afterwards, you are meeting that criteria. You are answering the question and you are using the information that has been provided within the graph. And so take a few, maybe a minute, pay particular attention to the graph, whether it's a graph or a table that has been given you. Pay particular attention, make sure you understand what is in there and understand what question is being asked about that graph, and then make a plan and then proceed with it.